Right, I think it's fair to say the Championship did not disappoint this weekend. Loads of talking points to go through. Let's jump into it. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel and to another episode of the Championship Roundup. Like I just mentioned, loads of talking points to go through in today's video. It is going to be split into two parts as normal. First half of the video, we'll be going over all this weekend's action, and the second half of the video, I'll be giving you guys my midweek Championship score predictions. So do get in the comments down below, what did you make of all the action? Do get your score predictions in there as well. Get yourself involved in the prediction leaderboard. Speaking of the prediction leaderboard, this is how the main league is currently looking. Things getting very close in and around here at the moment. Fair play to everyone who is currently in that main prediction league. I'm still trying to chip away and get into it myself. This is how the League One standings are looking, and fair play to everyone who got more than like a few points this game week, because it was so unpredictable in terms of the results that we actually saw in the Championship this game week. So fair play to everyone that did. And then this is how the League Two table is currently shaping up like. So like we always say, there's quite a few people who are within a few points of sneaking into that League Two league, so leave your midweek score predictions down below and you may just sneak in there. But without any further ado, guys, let's jump into this one. So let's start out with Friday night's game. That's all Brentford getting past Blackburn by 1-0. Ivan Toney's penalty on the 10th minute being the deciding factor between these two sides. Now, I do feel like in a lot of the Championship roundup videos that we've done recently, the referees have always ended up being a bit of a central point of the discussions that we've been having. I feel like the same is going to happen this week, really. The Toney penalty, it was a little bit soft, wasn't it? There is contact there, but it's minimal, and I suppose that in recent years, the threshold for giving a penalty in terms of the contact that is needed, it has gone down. So in this modern day and age, I can see why he's given it. But Toney slots the penalty away well. He almost scores an outrageous goal from a free kick later on in the game, but Kaminski was glad to see that one go just over. Kaminski later on in the match does make a very good save from, I think it was Force, who had a chance at point blank range, but he did well to save it. Blackburn in the second half definitely grew into this one, and if either side maybe was going to go on and get that second goal towards the end of that game, it was Blackburn who were pushing a little bit more, but just couldn't quite conjure up anything. Now, for Blackburn, a couple talking points from that second half, should they have had a penalty, is one of them, and the other one is of course the injury to Bradley Dack. I don't think that anyone wants to see this sort of thing happening, you know, opposition fans or whatever, considering that he's just got back from such a horrible ACL injury. The fact that this has happened again is really devastating for him, and he was just really getting back up into full flow as well, wasn't he? So yeah, long term, once again, that's a killer for Blackburn. I hope that he does manage to come back from that. You know, to come back from one ACL is tough enough, but to come back from two horrific injuries will be a real testament to him if he does. But yeah, in the end, Brentford do get through this one. Big week for the top of the Championship. It's a question of, I think it's very much looking like a three-horse race at the moment for that second spot, so Brentford do get over the line in this one. Next up then, we had Swansea beating Luton by 1-0. Now, a lot of what we've been saying about Swansea recently was probably true once again in this game. In terms of the performance levels, it wasn't great from Swansea here. You know, they scored fairly early on with one of the only real moments of quality going forward. Danda does quite well, and in the end, Hurahan has a bit of quality to put it in the back of the net, but they never really went for the kill after that. They were really quite content with sitting on it and just looking to hook things forward, trying to get things here and there on the break. But if either side was going to go on and get that second goal in the second half, it was certainly going to be Luton. But yeah, Swansea are just a really tough side to put your finger on, because on the eye test at the moment, they're not really sparkling like some of the other sides that we've seen at the top of the Championship, but they continue to grind out these results, so who am I to question it, you know? Luton, I did think, got quite unlucky in the second half not to get back into proceedings there. We spoke before about Ivan Toney nearly scoring a worldie, and Panzu nearly scored an absolute worldie, as Woodman was almost caught out, but he just about managed to rectify that, as he was almost lobbed from quite some way out. But yeah, it's another 3 points from Swansea, but we'll see if they can continue on this sort of pattern where the performances aren't necessarily great, but the results keep on coming in. After that, we saw Bristol City beating Birmingham by 3-0. Ultimately, this saw the end of Birmingham manager Aita Karanka. If you've not seen Birmingham fans, check out yesterday's video where we went into that in a little bit more detail. But in terms of the match itself, this might just have been one of the worst defensive performances that we've seen all season here in the Championship. And this has been the Championship season where we've seen like Wycombe concede 7 goals against Brentford. But each of the goals that Birmingham conceded here came from their own individual mistakes. But we still have to give a lot of credit to Bristol City, because One of my criticisms, I think a lot of people criticism of Bristol City so far this season, has been just how passive they've been in matches. For this one, they were a lot more on the front foot, pressing with their play. The intensity was back in their performance, and it's another away game under Nigel Pearson when they put 3 goals into the back of the net. You know, the first goal comes from Birmingham giving the ball away from a throw-in. Bristol City pressed that really well. It's a lovely finish by Palmer, who takes the ball in his stride. The second goal is just an embarrassing one for Birmingham by all aspects, but Semenyo does well to close down the ball once again. And the third goal, lovely little bit of link-up play by Palmer and O'Dowd there. Palmer really pulling the strings from that number 10 role, and a player who, you know, I think a lot of people have been saying is still a real gem. It's just about him turning a bit of consistency in his game. I think it was last season against Birmingham, actually, that he had a really good game for Bristol City, so he clearly seems to like this one. But yeah, for Birmingham from here on in, I mean, as of recording, they've not yet announced who's going to be coming in to replace Karanka or anything like that, but whoever does come in has got a real uphill battle from here. I said going into this next game that it might be the game of the weekend, and it did not disappoint. Barnsley 3, Bournemouth 2. An absolute rollercoaster this one. Barnsley take the lead from quite a nice set piece. Heelot gets on the end of it, but after that, Bournemouth react to it quite well. Danjuma and Solanke's goal just before half-time gives them a bit of control, but once again with Bournemouth, the same problems reoccurring. We mentioned this last time from their game against Preston. A good opening 45 minutes, followed by a shell of a performance in the second half. This Bournemouth squad is capable of playing well in spells, but when was the last time we saw a convincing 90 minutes from them? Ultimately, that might be the thing and the reason why they fall short of the playoffs in the end, because Barnsley now have given themselves a bit of breathing space, having that 4-point lead. Second half was pretty much all Barnsley, really. Bournemouth in the second half didn't have a single shot on target, which was a really poor showing. Freezer gets Barnsley back into it, and then Carlton Morris with the winner. How many important goals is he going to go on to score for Barnsley in the second half of this season? Brilliant ball in by Moat, by the way. It's inch perfect onto his head, and then just loops into the top corner past Begovic. But it had been coming for Barnsley, and fair play to them. You know, they were brave for this performance, given as well that Bournemouth had an extra week of preparation, given that Barnsley were playing in midweek. I think Barnsley, in terms of like the top 6 picture at the moment, very much are seen as the underdogs, and this was a massive win for them here. Bournemouth, mentally, that's a huge loss. Next up then to Cardiff, and a huge 3 points in the grand scheme of things for Watford here. A last minute winner saw them edging past them by 2-1. Now, Cardiff do take the lead in this one. It's a Serralta own goal, just misjudges the ball that comes in from Murphy a little bit. Obviously, Kiefer Moore was waiting to pounce on it, but in fairness to Serralta, I think that since he has been a bit more of a mainstay in this Watford backline, he's actually been a really decent member of them, putting in some good performances lately. But that lead for Cardiff wasn't to last long. It was a lovely goal that got Watford back into it. The footwork was absolutely dazzling by Chalobah. Launches it bottom corner after that. It's all round a fantastic goal. At that, Watford were pressing for that second goal. João Pedro nearly scored an absolute worldie. There seemed to be quite a few goals that, had they gone in this weekend in the Championship, would have been outrageous, but his overhead kick was saved. And in the end, it would take Watford up until the last minute, and Messina free kick. I've watched this countless times. I'm still not quite sure what Dylan Phillips is trying to do. He gets his technique all wrong, but the scenes at full time, you can tell that that goal really meant something to Watford there. And that last promotion spot, I'm really struggling to call at the moment, because I think that in terms of the consistency of performance from what we're seeing from Watford, Brentford and Swansea at this point in time, I think I'm most convinced by Watford. The only thing that they have sort of going against them is I think they have a considerably harder run-in than both Swansea and Brentford too. I mean, their last 2 games of the season are up against both Brentford and Swansea, so it's going to be a fascinating fight, but that right there, those extra 2 points, thanks to that free kick, could go a long way in the grand scheme of things. Next up then, let's head to Derby up against Millwall. Now, we did predict a 1-0 for this one, but I sided with Derby, but we always said that if Millwall scored the opening goal, we couldn't really see Derby getting back into proceedings here. Their record with getting back into games when they fall behind still remains quite poor this season. Now, it was a Hutchinson goal from a set piece in the end. You can see to the side of me all the match statistics from this game. Derby had absolutely loads of the ball, but ultimately never really could craft out anything inventive in the final third. I think that is a little bit of cause for concern for Derby now. That's the 4th consecutive match in the Championship where they have failed to score. Given that Mathematically, by no means are Derby safe at this point in time, you know, with the games in hand that Rotherham still have behind them. They'll definitely still be looking over their shoulders and taking into consideration, looking into some of their upcoming fixtures. They need to find some goals from somewhere. 3 out of their next 5 matches are up against sides who are currently in the top 6 of the Championship. So, yeah, they need to figure out sort of a plan B, if anything, to try and resurrect this current goal drought. Millwall, good win for them, albeit maybe not the most entertaining game of the weekend. Next up then, we then had Middlesbrough beating Stoke by 3-0, a result which pretty much puts an end to any outside hopes that Stoke had of sneaking into the top 6. We said coming into this game that should either side win, they'd still harbour sort of outside ambitions of sneaking into the top 6 come the end of the season. Middlesbrough currently find themselves 8 points off, but in the end a very good performance. First off especially, Middlesbrough were very good. A couple of defensive issues that could be picked apart from Stoke in terms of the goals they conceded here. The first goal, Tommy Smith's quite weak for this one actually, lets Hall get to the ball in front of him. The second goal also comes from Tommy Smith's side, quite a nice goal scored on the counter-attack. Paddy McNair finishes it well, and that was an example for their last goal actually as well. Mendes Liang on the counter-attack. A lot more speed about this Middlesbrough side with some of the additions that they made throughout January, obviously with Bolasie and Mendes Liang. Stoke did see a lot of the ball for that second half and were trying to take the game to Middlesbrough, but defensively they were quite rigid and stood strong, and ultimately, like we just mentioned, that third goal came on the counter-attack. So yeah, all things considered, great result there for Middlesbrough. Stoke just a bit frustrating to watch at the moment, aren't they? Next up then, we had Forest drawing 1-1 with Reading. Ultimately, this season for Forest now is all about survival, so in the grand scheme of things, that might not turn out to be a bad point actually, but given the situation that they were in and how long they were leading for in the second half, they'll probably been disappointed to concede that late equaliser. Reading themselves had a flurry of decent chances actually. There was one particular set-piece routine from a corner, which was actually really well crafted out. The ball falls to Lucas Chow and he just completely scuffs his shot. You bank on him scoring that chance, you know, 9 times out of 10 surely, but yeah, Reading had a couple of those moments. There was one in the second half where I think it was Puskas who raced the wrong goal, couldn't get his shot on target, and it was Forest who took the lead eventually. It was a home zone goal in the end, just smashing it into the back of his own net. Now, Reading's response in the end came in the form of Yaku Mete. How much of a miss has he been for Reading over the past few weeks? But yeah, he latches on well to Lucas Chow's through ball. Could Bryce Samba do a little bit better from this one? Potentially. The ball just sort of squirms under him. Mete hits it well, giving credit to him, but I think that Samba could potentially do a little bit better with that one. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that Reading will want to get as many points on the board as possible now, because looking at their end to the season, they've still got quite a few tricky games to come. So they've still got games remaining against the likes of Barnsley, Watford, Cardiff, Swansea and Norwich. So these sort of games are quite important for Reading now. Next up then, we had Huddersfield beating QPR by 1-0, a result which will go a long way in keeping Huddersfield up this season. Now, QPR we've been given a lot of plaudits to recently, but they find themselves 13th in the Championship now, in that awkward stage of the season whereby they're probably not going to make the playoffs, they're not going to go down, so they don't really have all too much to play for. So it's up to them players to sort of motivate themselves to get themselves up for these sort of games when ultimately there's not all too much on the line from them. But for Huddersfield, we've praised them quite a bit so far this season in terms of the build-up play and some of the goals they've actually scored. Another example of that was the Bakuna goal here. It was wonderfully worked out from the back, but where the mistakes have crept in for Huddersfield so far this season have been silly individual mistakes at the back, and ultimately they've not really been able to do the other side of the game all too well this season in terms of like seeing out a game, being a little bit gritty. Well, they won this game with a lot less possession than we're accustomed to seeing Huddersfield with, and there were also some pretty big defensive moments from them. I mean, that Schofield made one unbelievable save in the first half from Todd Kane at point blank range. I think Naby Sarr won every aerial duel that he had to go up for this afternoon. So yeah, massive 3 points for Huddersfield there. And then we had Wycombe beating North End by 1-0. What makes this all the more frustrating is that this sort of performance by Preston was totally and utterly predictable coming into this weekend. You know, I predicted us to lose against Wycombe, and it's happened again. That's 3 times pretty much this season where Wycombe have completely outplayed us. And I know that Wycombe have the sort of stereotype of being quite a direct side, you know, pumping balls into the box, and there was a little bit of that. You know, obviously the goal came from a set piece, but some of the build-up play to some of the other chances they had was actually really well worked out. We were completely played off the park for this one, and I'm baffled to know how Alex Neil got this so wrong again against such a similar opposition that we've struggled against so many times this season. How he's not figured out a plan B of how to approach these games a little bit differently. It paints a picture that our goalkeeper Iverson was our best player for this one, because without him Wycombe could have had 2-3 more goals. Ultimately our attacking intent for this game was absolutely non-existent. We had one half chance which was on target throughout the afternoon, and Wycombe were fully deserving of their 3 points. And then the last game to go over on Sunday saw Norwich beating Sheff Wednesday by 2 2-1. Now, Sheffield Wednesday started this game out actually really brightly, and I think caught a lot of people by surprise. They were fully worth their value of leading at half-time. It was Jordan Rhodes with the goal. If anyone was going to score, it was obviously going to be the former Canary. But yeah, much improved from Wednesday in that first half. You can see Darren Moore maybe starting to get his stamp on things at Wednesday, but what has been a bit of an occurrence with them recently, you know, thinking back to that Luton game, putting in the first half performance and then not being able to match it in the second. But I think we all expected Norwich to come out fighting and swinging for that second half, and they did just that with two unbelievable moments of quality. I mean, the Pookie finish is fantastic, but that's eclipsed by the Todd Cantwell goal. Buendia deserves a lot of credit for this one because Sheffield Wednesday were about to break, puts that tackle in. Actually, you know, a bit underrated Buendia in terms of the defensive work he puts in for the team, but great tackle, lays off Cantwell, and then with his left foot, if you watch the angle of this one from behind the goal, it's such a beautiful goal in the way that it travels and cuts through the air into the top corner. This is why Norwich will be a Premier League team next season, because they have this quality in absolute abundance when it's needed. So yeah, another consecutive win for Norwich here. Perhaps not as straightforward as we first thought out, but they do get over the line in the end. But guys, there were all the matches that went on this weekend. In terms of my results of the weekend, I've got to give that one to Barnsley. I think we're beating Bournemouth could be absolutely massive in the race for the top 6. And then for my goal of the weekend, a lot of contenders in here, but I think I'm just going to edge it to Todd Cantwell for that fantastic winner against Sheffield Wednesday. Get all your thoughts in the comments down below in terms of what you guys made of the weekend's action. But now, without any further ado, let's head into my midweek score prediction. So do leave your guys' predictions in the comments down below and get yourself onto the prediction leaderboard. Starting out with Cardiff up against Stoke. Both sides looking to bounce back from a quite disappointing weekend. I'm going to back Cardiff for this one. I think they've got a little bit more about them at the moment, and obviously to get themselves back to winning ways after suffering their first defeat under Mick McCarthy is going to be quite important to their top 6 hopes. So I'm going to go 2-0 Cardiff in that game. Derby up against Brentford. Think I've got to be back in Brentford for this one. Derby just not really showing much invention in the final third at the moment, failing to score in their last 4 matches. Another tough game around the corner here. I'm going to go 2-0 Brentford. Luton up against Coventry. Coventry not in action over the weekend, got a little bit more of a rest, but Luton always a bit of a tricky customer to come up against. I thought they got quite unlucky at the weekend not to get anything from their game against Swansea. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw in that game. Middlesbrough up against North End. I'm not all too confident really. Middlesbrough have been quite the hit and miss team recently. You know, consistency's not exactly been their thing, but who am I to talk about consistency? I'm a Preston fan. We've been all over the shop this season. I'm going to go 2-1 Middlesbrough in that game. Rotherham up against Watford. Rotherham, a team who we've not seen in action for quite some time now. It's going to be interesting to see if the rest has served them well, but it's a pretty tough game to be coming straight back into. I'm going to go 1-0 Watford in that game. They've been on a good roll lately. And then we got Bournemouth going up against Swansea, an absolutely massive game in both the top 6 race and the race for automatic promotion. I'm going to go for a draw in this one. You know, Bournemouth need to bounce back from the weekend with something on the board here. If they lose consecutive matches, Barnsley really have the opportunity there to stretch away from them. Swansea, they're getting results, but I'm still not 100% sold on the performances. I'm going to go for a draw in that game, 1-1. Very intrigued to see the outcome of it though. On Wednesday, we got Nottingham Forest going up against Norwich. I'm going to go 2-1 Norwich in that game. Norwich are just getting results at the moment, aren't they? They're playing with their style and they have that unbelievable quality in the final third. QPR up against Millwall. Going to go for a draw in that one, fancying it to finish as a 1-1. Wycombe up against Barnsley is an interesting one because I thought that Wycombe were actually very good at the weekend and were fully worth their 3 points against North End, but Barnsley are a different kettle of fish at the moment, aren't they? They're on a mission for the top 6, and what they have shown is they're capable of winning matches in different styles. If they need to be physical and direct against a team, they'll go ahead and do that, and for that reason I'm going to back Barnsley for a 2-0. Birmingham up against Reading. I'm going to go 2-1 Reading, although maybe, you know, the Karanka situation could have a part to play in that game. Blackburn up against Bristol City. Bristol City's away record under Nigel Pearson so far has actually been very impressive. I liked how they played at the weekend. Blackburn haven't been playing particularly badly lately, but the results haven't quite been falling in. Obviously the injury to Dak as well is a massive blow for them. I'm going to go 2-1 Bristol City. And then finishing things off, we got Sheffield Wednesday going up against Huddersfield. Bit of an improvement this weekend for Wednesday, but ultimately they need results on the board, don't they? I'm going to go for a draw in that one. I'm going to go for a 1-1. Big game in Huddersfield season. But as you can see to the side of me, those are my score predictions for what I see happening in the midweek games. Do get your guys' thoughts on them in the comments down below. But apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. So if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. As always, please do subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. Check out the Patreon, link to that is down below. But apart from that, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.